So I'll start us off. So my stories mostly have to do with my best friend, Steve Collier. Back in 1979, I had a black silk Cheap Trick baseball jacket. Got it at Highland Mall. And I walked into my job at the Village Cinema 4, and this previously very quiet usher named Steve came over and he said, "That's a nice jacket." And I said, "Thanks." This is like an epic conversation for us. So we eventually did start speaking more than one or two syllables to each other, and we started to talk about music a lot. We would talk on our breaks. We'd sit in Steve's Camaro, which I think was purple, and we would talk about how great Devo was. We were really excited about this. And then one day, we were outside of Cinema 2, and Steve said, "Well, you want to come see my band? We're playing on Tuesday night." I said, "Okay. What's the name of your band?" He said, "The Big Boys." And I said, "Okay, great." And so he told me to go to this place called Raoul's. The night comes, I get there, walk in the door, and look around and sort of see all these characters and this sort of what I later sort of understood was kind of a complete world with its own rock stars. And I looked up on stage, and the band that was up there was introducing themselves as Kmart and the Shoppers. They were big boys, they were big guys, they were all in drag, and my friend Steve was on drums in a dress and mascara. So, I'm a 17-year-old Texas suburban guy, and that was a little shocking, but I kind of rolled with it. I brought my camera. It was the first punk show I saw, and also the first punk show I photographed, and I took a picture of the singer, and he caught my eye, and then he stuck out his tongue just for me, and I thought, well, he saw me, he recognized me, or he invited me in, basically. So I took his picture, and it was great. It was really fun, and over the next couple of months, I became a regular at Raoul's and started going a lot, met a lot of people. Steve, as happens with these things, Steve didn't stay in the Big Boys forever. He was with the group for maybe a year or so, 6 months. And he eventually left and formed a group called the Capris, which became Doctor's Mob. But by this time, a lot of things had changed. And one of the things that I think was clear about punk was that it was kind of a year zero thing, right? You didn't talk about old music. You didn't, discuss things that were old because everything was new and you wanted to do something new and different. That kind of changed along about 1982 or so in my reckoning. But there was 3 records that came out about the same time in '82. There was a record called Days of Wine and Roses by the Dream Syndicate. Then there was a record by the Gun Club called Fire of Love, which blew my mind. It's like a blues punk sandwich, but I love it. And then there was Walk Among Us by the Misfits. And a lot of my friends loved the Misfits, but they were extreme. They were theatrical. And everybody was excited when we found out the Misfits were going to come to town, except me. I decided that I needed to wash my hair that night, or maybe I needed to stay home and listen to Bauhaus a little bit, but I didn't go to the show. I think, I don't know what time they played, but I think at midnight they were on, and some little thing twisted in my head, and I thought, I made a big mistake, I should have gone to this show. So the next week, I was scrambling around to talk to everybody I could. What were the Misfits like? What were the Misfits like? And they all said almost exactly the same thing. It was the loudest fucking show I've ever heard. And they were so terrible. They were so horrible. They were just like Kiss. So I'm asking everybody. I'm desperate. It's wow, I wish I'd have gone. Finally, I get to my man Steve, and I say, "Steve, how are the Misfits?" He's like, "They were so great. They were just like Kiss." That's pretty good. I think I'm under time. There you go.
I have no idea what I'm going to talk about, but that never stops me. I knew I wanted to play music from the time I was 7 years old on. I saw the Rolling Stones on Ed Sullivan and went, that's for me. And fast forward to 1977, 1978, I was a hard rock kid growing up. But by 77 and 78, like Journey and Styx had taken over the radio and everything fucking sucked. And I'm in my room with a guitar and Journey's at the Irwin Center and there is nothing in between. There's no local music, there's nothing. Cover bands and there's nothing. And I start discovering these little bits and dribs and drabs. You know, saw Devo at Saturday Night Live, heard Elvis Costello, like little things. I was riding my bike down the drag and I saw a flyer for this radio show, the Reverend Neil X. It looked like a punk rock flyer, so I took it home. I tuned it in at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, and like the first 5 songs I heard was Generation X, the Buzzcocks, Stiff Little Fingers, the Stranglers, and the Clash. And I went, I don't know what this is, but I'm in. And I went to intersect them the next day, and it turns out that the DJ worked at the record store? Like the DJs are people? And I bought 2 of those singles that he played the night before. And around the same time, I'm a senior in high school still. I'm riding my bike down the drag one Friday night, and I see all these people standing around outside this club that I used to sneak into when I was 12. And I went, this looks interesting. And I stop, and I lock my bike up, and I go in. And I saw the last 3 songs by The Mistakes, and I watched the next entire set. And saw the Rats painting on the wall, and the next had a box in front of the stage that said they were taking donations of drugs and money for their trip to the West Coast. And I'm going, I don't know what this is, but I'm in, you know. I still had hair down to here and a beard the first time the Big Boys played. The hair went between that and the next week when we played again. The beard went between that show and the third show. And I will say that all those people who helped form that community were insanely welcoming to us, because we sucked for about 6 months. And a very entertaining singer. But we figured it out, you know. And it's so amazing, because like all my life, that's all I wanted to do is play music and be part of a community. And I never found, I'm the kind of guy who feels like he's not quite sure he belongs at his own birthday party a lot of the time. So finding this community and finding welcoming people was amazing, and supportive people, and the bands were all like there with each other, and we were all right there. Like there was about 6 bands that played their first show the night the Big Boys played our first show, and this whole second wave came in, and it was kind of the beginning of the next generation and sort of a DIY thing, and we kept meeting people from around the country, and we kept finding out new ways of doing things, and like we went to California on tour, not because we had any idea what the fucking point of a tour was, but because it sounded like fun. And we went skateboarding more than we played shows, and we came back and our audience doubled in size. And you know, we started making records, and we started meeting people from around the country who were occupying the same sort of a place in their city that we were beginning to occupy in ours. And I don't know if that exists anymore. Like, it bums me out that there's not one single venue here in Austin with a thriving music community of people in their 20s or even 30s. But that's a drag, you know? It bums me out that there's not some 19-year-old kid who just bought a pair of leather pants and said, fuck it, let's go play a band, make a band and get laid. It's not happening anymore. You know, I feel so incredibly grateful for all the stuff that I was shown and the experiences I got to have with a lot of you guys. And, you know, I've made amends to a lot of you already, so, you know. I mean, like if I met you anytime between, say, 88 and 98, I'm sorry. So, but it's such an amazing experience. And the guys who were here before me welcomed us, and we did our best to welcome the people coming up behind us and tried to keep it going, you know. And a quick little story, like things are rolling along, and we get to a place where, like, if you're coming to Texas, we're setting up all your shows, and we're playing in all Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, wherever with you. And when we go to Ohio or whatever, you're playing with us. And Minor Threat comes through in 1983, and Big Boys don't have a van because we're changing drummers, and the old drummer took the van, and well, he owns the van. And so we're doing this. We're doing Austin and Houston and Dallas with Minor Threat and the Offenders, and we're putting some gear in the Offenders. And a couple of our guys are riding in the Offenders small wheelbase Chevy van, and 4 of us are riding in my girlfriend's Volkswagen. And we go down, and all the bands stop in Columbus, like you do at the Dairy Queen, on our way to Houston. And when we come back out, Minor Threat's van won't start. They've broken their timing chain. So we put all of the bands into the Offenders short wheelbase van and continue on to Houston. Spot is with us. He's playing Black Flag songs on a clarinet. I don't know why exactly. There were 14 people in that short wheelbase van. And we played the show in Houston. It was a great success. That night, maybe the next morning, I don't know, Felix Griffin was there. His mom drove down. There were some other guys in the car. Rob Buford may have been in the car. I don't know. They took Ian back to College Station. Back to Columbus. They pushed the van down to a gas station, and the people at the gas station said they could fix it. The rest of us went on to Dallas. We were panicking because the first band in Dallas played, no Ian. The second band in Dallas played, no Ian. The big boys played in Dallas, no Ian. And just as we finished, he came hauling in 90 miles an hour, got on stage and played an incredible show. But that's the way it went back then. It wouldn't have happened without fans in the audience to help him and without the Offenders being able to put 14 sweaty people in a van. And it's a miracle I remember any of it. So anyway, that's enough for me. Who's next?
Howdy, I am Alice Berry, and a lot of you know me as Jim Berry's little sister, or Jim Berry's little sister. I started falling into the scene because Jim was the sound man at Raoul's and Duke's and Butthole Surfers, etc. But I was a sorority girl also, and some of you knew that, and some of you laughed, and some of you thought it was terrible, and were mean, and other people who realized, hey, we're all misfits, and she feels like a misfit there, and we're going to welcome her in. So I thank those who realized I kind of didn't fit in. And in a funny way, I'm starting a new phase of my life now because I just retired, and so now I don't have to worry if I drop any F-bombs or other words and it's being recorded, because I won't lose my job. And so I'm going to be quoting some people tonight. So one of the first stories, I was living at Tri-Towers, and they didn't really know at the desk about my other life because I was changing in the car on the way and putting on my fishnets and all, and then getting down to Raoul's and then changing clothes on the way back. But little Dana wanted to come and visit me one day, and she dressed like she dresses and like I dressed when I was at Raoul's, and she gets to the desk and they won't let her in, and she makes it clear that they are going to let her in, and she just marches to the elevator, and as it closes she just says, "Bite my dick," and boom, and up. That was the mic drop in those days. We didn't have mic drop then. So I appreciated that little Dana, that the Texas Blondes and all these other people said, yes, come on in, be part of us. I had other friends defend me when I was bridging into this. We were at a Droog show, and my wonderful friend Laura, who was from New York and also from a nice family, but also was diving down with me. She was a little better at the dive, and she was kind of a better scrapper. There was a woman at the time who hated me. She called me Barbie because I would dress rockabilly for rockabilly shows and punk rock for punk rock shows, and I didn't get the memo that you have to choose a persona and you're not allowed to change, so I didn't care. But she cared, and so she would push me into the crowd. I'd find cigarette burns on my clothes, etc. And this one particular Droog show, they were the opening act. It was almost the end, and Laura was getting really sick of this woman who has later apologized to me, which is why I'm not going to say her name. But she kept pushing, and Laura was finally, "Alice, go get me something to drink. I want something sticky and sweet." So I came back with a Coca-Cola, and with the next shove, Laura, oops, splashed the Coke in her face, and a cat fight ensued right in front of the Droogs, who was their very last song. And actually kind of ended the song because there's an amazing cat fight going on, and Laura was good, and she was like landing punches, and this other girl was just kind of scratching. I mean, it was really a cat fight. Her husband came and finally dragged her out, and as they were walking out the back of the Ritz Theater there, she finally yells out, "I'm gonna get you, Alice Berry!" And Laura yelled out, "Suck my cunt, bitch!" And Alan Droog found Laura. He beelined for Laura, and he's like, "Oh my God, I almost came in my pants when you said suck my cunt, bitch. Do you want to join the band?"
Alice, you can't say that.
I can say those words now because I retired. She did not join the band, however. Last little bit of my transition, I was also the Duchess of Houston for Austin Aquafest. Yes, the little parade down the water and the wave. Not going to talk about the second night when I took my bow and then went to the Psychedelic Furs. Going to talk about the first night beforehand. And I had a hotel room there at the Sheraton. All of the duchesses and the princesses and the queen had a room at the Sheraton. And I was living in Austin, but hey, why not use the room for the after party for the Rock Hats show at Club Foot? So yes, we had the after party at the Sheraton where all of the other girls who were debuting that night were there and their families and etc. So at one point I had over 50 people in my hotel room with its 2 double beds. And my then roommate, Rob Jacks, used to work. You know this will be good, right? So Rob used to work at the Sheraton. So he sneaks down to the kitchen and steals a 5-gallon thing of vanilla ice cream and some bottles of booze that showed up somewhere. The authorities came and told us to be quiet or leave, and told us to be quiet or leave, and by the third time, yes, we had to leave. And I look around, and Helen McDonald had kicked out a hole in the wall with her spike-heeled shoes, which I thought was pretty cool, actually. But I went home, and then the next day, my parents show up to town, and so we all show up at the hotel together. And, oh, honey, let's see your room. Oh, yeah, okay, and we go to my room. Oh, my goodness, it is so dirty. Why didn't they clean my room before I got here? My parents never said anything. To this day, I mean, surely they got charged, I don't know. But my happy moment about that was being in the elevator, and I hear some of the other girls from Aquafest saying, oh my God, did you see all those punk rockers here last night? Because Van Halen was staying here last night. I bet that was their party. And I just said to myself, no, that was the Duchess of Houston's party. Thank you.
5 seconds. Memoir, that's why I brought my book, but it's a condensed version, and this may seem redundant after Alice, but it's titled, None of This Would Have Happened If Not for the Girls. Okay. What's going on? Should I hold the mic or what? All right. I'll do just like I used to sing into, the microphone. Okay, none of this would have happened if not for the girls. It's not just guys starting a band so they can meet girls. You've heard that before. It's deeper than that. In the beginning, there was Eddie and me. Eddie Munoz, a great guitar player and performer, and outrageous character. We had a band called Jelly Roll, a glam rock blues band. Like a lot of people in our world, we just wanted to be the Rolling Stones. That's it, really. Eddie and I, however, might never have met, but our girlfriends forced us on each other. We would be out at clubs, printing like rock stars, pretending we didn't notice the other guy. Eddie's girlfriend was Carla Olson, a great guitar player and singer who looked like Joni Mitchell, only better. One night at the Armadillo, Diane went to the bar, then suddenly she comes back with Carla and Eddie. Carla says, you guys need to meet. You need to start a band. So we started a band, we hit it off, and that was that. Then one night we're at Mother Earth, and these 2 young rock and roll chicks come up to us and say, hey, are you guys in Jelly Roll? They recognize us, that's cool, right? And the redhead turns out to be, her name is Kathy Valentine, and her dark-haired friend is Marilyn Dean. Later we learned that Kathy is 16 years old and Marilyn is 16. The doorman at Mother Earth was kind of slack. Kathy says, hey, what year is your precision? That's a 63. She says, oh, cool, pre-CBS. Well, that's musician talk. We were very impressed. Turns out she plays a 63 Strat, though. Marilyn says, it's my birthday. I got a drum kit for my birthday. We're starting a band. It was so unusual. This is 76, 77. It was rare for women to be playing rock and roll in those days. We got to be friends, we hung out, and they were very good at hanging out. Kathy was also, besides being like total rock and roller, very, very funny. She always reminded me a lot of like Lucille Ball. I mean, she was hilarious. We bonded over punk rock. Kathy and Marilyn played some gigs, but then in the fall of '77, Marilyn, Carla, and Kathy were starting an all-girl punk band called the Violators. They couldn't find a girl bass player. Would I be interested? Jelly Roll had broken up, so why not? Rehearsals were fun, loud, and beer-soaked. We played a lot of covers, and I wrote a couple of originals for them. Give Me Some, you might recall. Every practice, Eddie was there, and during breaks, he and I would jam. We thought, hey, this is great. Why don't we start a punk band? The Violators needed an opening act. We recruited our friend Billy Blackman on drums, and after one too many beers one night, we came up with a name, the Skunks. We had gigs coming up. You know, people would yell, "You stink," you know, it pissed me off at first. It didn't occur to me that that was going to happen. 6 years later, when they're still doing it, like, they just started up, it was really annoying.
I heard that one.
Yeah. So the first punk rock show at Raoul's was in January, just a week after the Sex Pistols. This was the raw beginning, you know. So this happened to be my first date with Lois. Long story short, she's my wife. She's right here. Right? Well, she's another woman who made all this happen. Kathy Valentine introduced us. Lois was hot and super cool. Sparks flew. She had lived in New York, saw the Ramones and Blondie at CBGB, saw Blondie in London. I was very impressed. I had to work hard to show her how cool I was. Lois is the one who told me to cut my hair. I was pretty proud of my Keith Richards shag, but she said, if you're going to be playing in these cool bands, you don't want to look like a hippie. She's tough. I said, she is tough. Always has been. So I cut my hair. When the Skunks were playing at Raoul's for a $1.50 cover, all these guys were trying to slip through saying, hey, I'm a friend of the band. So Lois took over the door after that with a sign that said, friend of the band, support them, $2 a cover. We made more money that way. I'd like to read a couple of paragraphs about the first Violators show to give an idea of what it was like in '78. This is out of my memoir. That's why I said I'd read it. I'm still reading, right? Sorry. I should have expected the Skunks after the Skunks set, but there were a lot of freaky reactions to the Violators. You'd have thought the girls were naked. From the opening chords of the Pistols, Pretty Vacant, people clustered around the stage. Fights broke out for no reason. Things kept getting weirder. The people who really hated us didn't seem to care if we were playing the Sex Pistols or Chuck Berry. They hollered and insulted us just as loudly. You guys suck. Show us your tits. Several creeps were already hanging by the dressing room door. Before the night was over, we'd have to enlist Joseph and Bobby to expel the wannabe groupies who didn't seem to understand the word no, or even the more explicit, get the fuck out of here. Apparently, some guys assumed that any girl who played in a rock band would jump at the chance to have sex with anything on two legs, anytime, any place. The girls were amazingly good sports about it, though. The more tasteless and naive the proposition, the more they laughed. Every night I played with the Violators. Some dude without a clue would come around and say to one of my bandmates, hey, y'all play pretty good for girls. Almost exactly 2 years after that first gig, I got a call from Kathy in Los Angeles. She told me excitedly, but in a modest, you're not going to believe this, tone, that she had just joined a band. They were called the Go-Go's. She was playing bass. They had a record deal. Before long, she was collecting royalties on a platinum-selling record and living the life of a genuine pop star in LA. I'm sure you're familiar with Kathy's other achievements. She wrote a memoir too. And Carla hasn't done too badly either. Lois and I lived in LA last year, and during that time, among other things, Carla produced 3 new albums, including the new Jake Andrews instrumental guitar feast. Pretty good for girls, yeah.
Estes. I'm the first non-rock star coming up here, I guess. These are my pictures up front. I didn't take them. I stole them fair and square off of Facebook. That first one is me and E.A. Schwery. She was my college roommate. And I was on skates at Raoul's dressed as a roller derby queen. The next one's Mike Runnels from The Mistakes. That's me dancing. And over here we have... Yeah, that's me at the Norvell's with my roommate Johnny 1980. And the last one is me and my ex-husband Stephen Estes. So I went to Raoul's almost every single day. I was 18 that 78 spring when I first went to Raoul's, and it really changed my life. It's the first time I actually felt fitting in with all these weirdos, and I had been a misfit my whole life, and I instantly fell at home at Raoul's. So I'm going to tell y'all a few funny stories I remember about Sluggo. Had a few articles in Sluggo, and I was friends. EA, my roommate, worked with Nick Modern. So one thing I remember is we had a Sluggo party where everyone took acid, and we made covers for the magazine. And everybody made different covers and put them on the magazine, and every single magazine had an original cover. And the one that really stuck in my mind that I still have, I loved Patti Smith. She really moved me. And someone took the Patti Smith single that was worth a lot of money as a collector's item and broke it on purpose and glued it on the cover. And I just thought that was so cool, even though I wish I had the single. And then the other Sluggo incident I'll never forget is I'm hanging out with Nick Modern, and all of a sudden this big dark sedan pulls to the front door, and 4 men in black get out, like suits, and they walk to the door, and they're banging on the door. We're like, holy shit, who are these guys? What do they want? And we open the door. It's the feds, and they're looking for Bert Cruz because he stole all those IRS 1040 forms and made records posters and put them all over the drag.
It's true. All true.
Yeah. Lynn Keller was my roommate too with EA, and the Records were my favorite band back then. I just loved everything they did, and I really loved that poster. I still have that too. And I'm telling you, the men in black were after us.
How'd you get rid of the men in black?
We said, Bert Cruz, don't know him. Never heard of him. They left. But another really funny story I remember is, I was at UT 77 to 81, got my degree in anthropology, but I was kind of a delinquent, and we were spray painting Norvell's on the drag with a stencil. And of course we were all tripping, as we were a lot of the times. And so we're going, I don't even remember who was with us, but there's like 4 or 5 of us spray painting Norvell slogans on the drag. And if you remember back then, somebody else, I heard it was someone in our crowd, was doing graffiti about the Ayatollah Khomeini or some kind of, the Shah, it was the Shah, that's what it was. And so they thought we were them, that we were making these, but we were just punks making punk things on the drag. But anyway, the cops came, they arrested all my friends, but I got away. And I felt so bad, I went back and gave myself up. Because they had my friends, and the cop was so impressed that he let us go.
Don't try this at home.
Another thing I really remember, I took in my last, second to last semester at UT, I took Jerry Dean's rock and roll history class. And if you made a band, you got to be automatic A. So me and Karen Margoloff, which was Brett Bradford's girlfriend from Scratch Acid, were in that band. And we played at Club Foot. And I was a bass player because Stephen Estes, my husband, he was my boyfriend then, he was a bass player. So he'd show me what to play, and I just remember, but I really didn't know shit. I couldn't play anything. So I played topless at Club Foot, because no one would notice I sucked if I was, 20 with my boobs out. They loved us. We were called the gay politicians. And Frank Kozak made our poster.
Of course he did.
Yeah. And, Raoul's really defined who I am. And if y'all don't know now, I am a agitator, topless protester against open carry gun guys. And I follow around the gun guys topless, and they hate me because it steals their thunder and it keeps them off TV. The Rolling Stones said I was the 48th coolest thing at South by Southwest. Made me into the agitator, troublemaker, hellraiser that I still am today. One more quick story. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but The Speed of Light by Brian Hansen had its movie debut at my house. And we had this giant party on MLK with like 300 people came, and it was a wild all-night party. That was really a lot of fun. I'm up out of time. I'll tell y'all that one personally if you want, but it was involving tripping and toplessness and stuff too, as per usual for me. But I'm really glad to see all my friends again.
In '77, I was living in San Marcos. I was back at Southwest Texas after having dropped out twice so far. I played in bands in high school, but nothing was really happening. I was close friends with Roland Swinson and David Fox, and I played music previously with David Cardwell and Bob Murray that were later in Standing Waves. I knew Jesse through art school friends and Margaret Moser from Clubs and Rumors, the magazine that she wrote for. My musical taste had kind of wandered from the mainstream in the mid-'70s. Was listening to Eno and Velvet Underground and who else? Bowie, Modern Lovers. And I was working at a bookstore in San Marcos that had a fantastic selection of magazines. So I was reading about the CBGB scene in Cream and New York Rocker and Village Voice, Patti Smith, Television, Talking Heads, Blondie. Was following all these bands that I'd never heard, but was avidly reading about them. So as the records came out, I would go to Austin and go to Inner Sanctum and get them. And the records really fit with where my head was at that point. I hadn't been playing lately, but I was inspired by everything I was listening to. In the summer of '78, Roland told me about Raoul's. I drove down that weekend and saw the Skunks and the Next, and they just totally kicked my ass. It was really beautiful. It was so intense. It was also really hot. And I thought, man, I found my people. I found my place, and I'm sweating up a storm. And so I take off my T-shirt, and then Bobby is standing next to me. He's like, "Put your shirt on." I was like, "Oh man, it's really hot." Put your shirt on. And Roland's like, "Do what he says. Don't fuck with Bob." So let's see. After that night, I started trying to put a band together. I called Cardwell, and he was in the RTF school at UT, along with about half the people on the scene in Raoul's at that point. Half the people in the band seemed like were RTF folks, and enlisted teenage pianist Shona to play on this Farfisa organ that I borrowed, and we started looking for a drummer. Right around this time, the Huns bust occurred. The Huns were on stage doing their show from a poster that said "No police" on it. And yet, the police were there for some reason. Things started getting out of hand, and there were some undercover cops who were agitating, and all hell broke loose, and unidentified police officers rushed the stage and grabbed Phil, who then turned to the guy and said, "Give us a kiss." And yeah, shit happened after that. And Richard Dorset, Bobby, Nick Barbaro, several other people got arrested. There was a really terrific trial. The judge, Steve Russell, was a very interesting guy. Everybody got off for everything except for Phil, who, when he read him the actual words of what you're charged with, he said, "Did you da 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 da?" And he goes, "Yes." And I was like, "Okay, I got no choice. You're guilty." So anyway, around that time, after riding on their notoriety, the Huns booked a show at the Texas Union Ballroom, and it was the first show for Chris Wing, who played solo as blind somebody. I can't remember who. It was the first show for Terminal Mind, who played as Red. And it was Standing Wave's first show, and we were billed as Latent Homos, which I think was a Phil Tolstead dig at Cardwell. They had some kind of beef. So anyway, I got the name Standing Waves from my physics songbook for my dwindling college career. So anyway, started playing, started writing more songs. At the start of '79, Randy Franklin and Bob Murray joined the band, and everything really took off from there. We played every Monday night at Raoul's in 1979, 3 sets a night, plus whatever other gigs we could get. We played, we opened for John Cale, Joe Jackson Magazine, and Blondie that year. We played some theme shows with the big boys. We did Standing Waves at Home at Raoul's and Standing Waves in Africa at Duke's. And the big boys were, as you might imagine, fantastic partners for a thing like that. What else? Let's see. Oh, we're in the movie Roadie, which is showing at AFS this weekend. It's a one-of-a-kind stinker if you haven't seen it. It's quite something. The thing I remember about it was we heard that the cinematographer had worked with Neil Young on Human Highway, a movie he was making. So we were talking him up, and he said of Roadie, "I knew the movie was in trouble when it was being directed by Alan Rudolph and produced by Zalman, comedy being directed by Alan Rudolph and produced by Zalman King, the two guys I know in Hollywood who don't have senses of humor." Let's see, what else happened that year? We put out our first record, the Early Warning EP, the first movie. I got to tell a story about Rocky and what Gracer dancers Billy was, and okay, Rocky, there you go. Talk to me like, oh yeah, and then I did drop out of school for the third time.
Yeah, so I'm Ralph, which is my preferred name in this crowd. But my real name is Lisa, which most of you know now. Anyway, we seem to all be following a theme to starting from the beginning. And of course, my story is my first night at Raoul's and how that impacted my life. When I first walked 5 miles to the drag to, look for a job, I purposefully went to Conan's Pizza first because it was right next door to Raoul's, and I was dying to go there, and I'd be working there every night, and I'd look across the parking lot and try and get up the nerve to go, and I was too scared. And one night, these guys came in and they looked interesting and they ordered their pizza. Instead of calling out their name, I walked it over to their table and introduced myself. And that was the Electric Tools or the Electric Toys?
Electric Tools.
Electric Tools, thank you. And so So after chatting with them, they said, hey, we're playing next door. Do you want to be on the guest list? And famous last words, I said, what's a guest list?
As you do.
I never forgot that one. So I went over with them. I was underage. They were all getting X's on their hands. I thought, wow, that's so cool. I asked Tuck, can I have an X? He said, do you want a drink? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, then you don't get an X. And that was carding back then. So I went in and just started being obnoxious, walking up to people, poking them and saying, hey, who are you? You know, I wanted to meet people and I was just trying, and I thought, you know, being obnoxious was punk rock. So I did meet quite a few people that night. Carolyn Estes was one of them. The Reactors were playing that night, and Sensuous Plastique. And I loved it all, and I was like, oh my God, this isn't scary at all, this is really cool. And after, you know, the new people that I met, when I said, oh, what's behind that curtain where everybody's going? And they went, oh my God, that's backstage. Don't even try to go back there. Tuck will kill you. So I was just kind of standing there, kept my eye on the door, saw him looking down at an ID, and I was like, right back behind that curtain. And just went in and started talking to the Reactors. And that's actually when I got my nickname, because I'd been making up names all night and I got tired. So I just started telling everyone Ralph, and Mike Reynolds was like, cool, that's my dad's name. And if you keep refusing to tell me your real name, I'm just going to start calling you Ralph. So that's kind of how that stuck. And anyways, I'm just sitting there, you know, chatting and everything, and Carl Schultz just gets up, sticks his drumsticks in his pocket, and starts walking past me and just looks over at me and he goes, you coming? And I said, where are we going? He said, my place. And I said, okay. And so, you know, that was my introduction to Raoul's, and, you know, something that's kept me going to this day. So that's all I got. Thank you.
All right, hi. I was in a little band called Terminal Mind. And drummer was Greg Murray, his twin brother Doug on guitar, Jack Crow on synth, and I played bass guitar and sang. And I didn't know how to play bass at the time when we started, but I did play guitar and piano, so I figured how hard can it be. When we first started, Doug was a little timid. Actually, he was pretty much timid the whole time. And so I suggested when we go out on stage, what you need to do first thing is separate your feet by about 3 feet, so it looks like, at least looks like you're doing something, because he was a very precise guitar player. We got our big break opening for Iggy Pop at the Armadillo in 1980. An amazing show. Gary Floyd and the Dix people were all in a row over on Doug's side of the stage, and throughout our set they were chucking beer cans up on stage at his feet, and he kept getting angrier and angrier and backing up more. It was like one of the best shows he ever played because of that anger. After this set, we were back in the dressing room, and Iggy, or Jim as he's known, popped into the dressing room and said, so how was it out there, guys? And I was like, oh, that's so awesome. Doug said, yeah, but there were some punks that were throwing beer cans at us. And Iggy said, were they full? And he said, no. I said, well, you don't have anything to worry about, right? So shortly after that, we had a gig scheduled to headline at Duke's Royal Coach Inn. And at the time, I was trying to make every show kind of look and feel different, doing different things with the stage. And for that show, I was looking at the stage. They had these big mirrors behind the stage. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we set up facing the mirrors so the only way people could see our faces is to look in the mirror at us? And Doug said, absolutely not. Oh, I forgot to mention, Doug and Greg were Scientologists, which provided me no shortage of opportunities to make fun of them. Anyway, he said no, and I said, why not? He said, well, L. Ron Hubbard, in his book on art, says you never turn your back on the audience. And I probably said something rude about what L. Ron Hubbard could do with a body part. And the band was over. We played the last few shows that we had booked, and that was it. Moved on. And, yep. Hi, Mom. Anyway, so, let's see, in '85, I lived for about 6 months in New York City, and that summer, I lived in the East Village. That summer I saw Einstürzende Neubauten, which is still to this day the loudest show I've ever seen, and I saw the Butthole Surfers at least 6 times. They kept coming through that summer, and the last of those shows I saw was at the Danceteria. Opening band was Scratch Acid, and it was classic. It was an amazing show. After that show, everybody was funneled into a tight hallway to get outside, and I found myself face to face with Gibby, who I had never met. And Gibby said, "What are you doing here?" And I didn't even know he knew who I was. He said, "No, dude, I saw Terminal Mind rehearsing once while I was tripping on acid, and that's what made me want to be in a band." And I said, "Well, I've got to return the compliment. You guys are totally inspiring me right now." So I moved back to Austin and formed the band that would become Miracle Room at that point. Huh?
You got a minute if you want to.
Okay, so one more story about Terminal Mind. We were scheduled to play 2 shows, Friday and Saturday night, headlining at the Continental Club, and they allowed us to pick whoever we wanted to be the opening act, and we picked a band that I had gotten a press packet from. A mutual friend knew this band in Portland, Maine, called the Dons. And the Dons were pretty weird. Their package had a cassette tape that sounded like you couldn't tell what the songs were. Had a clipping that was the Dons played at this bar on this night. Didn't say anything about them. No pictures. I said, let's get them to open for us. So they drove 40 hours straight to Austin just to do the 2 shows. The guy that was manager and owner of the Continental Club at the time hated them. I thought they were great. They reminded me a lot of a very humorous Susie and the Banshees. They had that kind of drum thing, and did a song called "The Pope Goes to Poland." I thought they were great. He was going to pull the plug on them the first night, and I said, no. He said, well, they're definitely not playing tomorrow night. And I said, they drove 40 hours to play both. You said we could have who we wanted. They're going to play. He said, no, they're not playing tomorrow night. And I said, well, if they're not playing, we're not playing. She said, fine. And while we were standing there, Phil Lanahan, who was the manager of the Huns, and Larry Sluggo, overheard the conversation, and by the time our set was over that night, they had gone to Larry's place.
Yeah, you can stop.
Okay, how do I do that?
Yeah, 30 seconds.
All right. They had gone to Larry's place, printed up posters with map of how to get from the Continental Club to the Vault, which was the first storage place above half-price books on Lavaca, and we played the next night there. It was awesome. I have Terminal Mind swag if you want to buy something.
Hi, my name is Adriane Shown, but a lot of people know me as Ash. A Shown, Ash Own, and my initials used to be ASH at one point. Regardless, I've moved cities 19 times. I've lived in San Antonio a couple of times. This is my 4th time in Austin. Some were repeats, others, like DC. where I went to high school and fell into punk rock by accident. I wanted to be a beatnik, but I was born far too late for that. But I had a black beret and wore black clothes and read Patti Smith and and wrote poetry. And some gal at my school with her orange hair said, "Ooh, come to my house for lunch. I live across the street." Great. So she puts on some basement cassette tapes. "Want to fuck you?" I'm like, wow, okay. Here's another one. "Want to fuck you?" Okay, great. Do you listen to anything else? No, I'm a true punker. So I thought, well, I'm out because I play piano and flute, and I listen to The Who, and and my brother's father was turning me on to The Clash and Patti Smith and David Bowie and all these other bands, that I'm like, no, I'm interested in the poetry of the lyrics and not merely the ga 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 ga. So that was the end. But then I ended up back in San Antonio, where my dad had a gallery where the Butthole Surfers played one of their first gigs, which I learned about when I found a paper cockroach on the ground. I'm like, what's this? And my dad told me about how much he loved the band. So I ended up bartending, turning 18 behind the bar of Raw Power, and where all the Austin bands came through. Or the woman booking, Dee Dee Williams, you may know. She's the one that brought me up to Austin for one of the last Clubfoot shows, the Dicks, famously a little piglet, formaldehyde piglet was passed around, and the liver down the pants, underpants of Gary's nurse outfit. I thought, okay, performance art, I'm in. But by the time I moved up here, I already knew plenty of the bands, and I've been in bands that you've never heard of because we did nothing. All of our rehearsals devolved into parties. And though I did rehearse with Marching Plague at one point, and so at one point I'm working at the adult toy store Forbidden Fruit, and yes, and you're not allowed to say dildo, but you can sell them as big as your arm. And so at the time, Chris Gates and I, and our friend Mike Carroll were all living together. And it was pretty much the host house of all the bands coming through. And at any given moment, there was an endless parade of after-show parties and whatnot. So one of the nights that I got off work, it was my birthday, and also the night before Woodstock. So here come. This is when Tales of Terror moved to Austin. I was greeted at my door by Lion from Tales of Terror, sadly no longer with us, but he had a blender of brown goo. And he's like, "Drink it!" I'm like, absolutely not. What's in it? And he goes, "No, it doesn't matter. It's my special recipe. Just drink it." I'm like, "Tell me what's in it." He goes, "Well, I found some things in your fridge." I'm like, "My fridge?" Like, no, nothing. He goes, "Yeah, there were some old mushrooms and some tomato." I'm like, "Yeah, no, not having it." So there were Tales of Terror, Tex and the Horseheads, Human, I don't even remember who else. But in the morning, I woke up to Texacala Jones sleeping in the bed between Chris and I'm like, "Oh, hello, good morning." And a banging on the door was the funeral. We lived behind a funeral home, and the funeral director came over and said, "Could you please collect your friends from our bushes? Because we have a funeral coming in, and could you please?" So we did that, but when I went back to DC, worked in a bar there after turning 21, working in a bar in LA. Whoops. And no one asked. And that was, it turned out to be a drug front bar. I didn't know. I thought it was rock and roll, you know, everybody's spreading around cocaine. But that's when I left LA the first time. But back in DC, I was working in this tiny bar called Asylum, where two young guys were talking about all these Austin punk bands. And I go, oh, Scratch Acid, yeah, let me tell you about the time that David Yao lit a fart, the first time I ever saw one. I didn't know, and every band they mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, I know them, or I knew them, and I'm like, oh my God, it sounds braggadocious, but you have to understand how tiny the scene was. And even in less than 300 people in San Antonio and Austin combined, then there were those tiny enclaves. So, anyway.
Hey guys, I thought maybe since we've been talking about this club so much, you'd want to see it. Drew, do you mind full screen and play the video? Hopefully it shows. Marcello was so nice to set this up for me. I got a film degree in 1983, and this is the second film I've made in the past 2 weeks, so. Oh man. Well, it's playing on the TV screen, so. I wonder what's going on. Oh, here he comes. So I moved to Austin in 1979, moved into Jester Dorm, and I was walking around 5th floor Jester West, and I saw Mike Carroll every day. We lived on the same damn dorm floor, and oh, fantastic. And I saw these kids on my dorm floor just sitting in their rooms the first night of freedom, watching their television, and I'd never had freedom before, so I was like going to go out and drink, because I'd been drinking in high school for 2 years, and I felt like I was a good partier. So I asked these people so this is our club. It was fantastic. I wish I had the other incarnations of it with the boxes and stuff on it, but the building's still there. I love this. It looks like there's a horse-drawn buggy that was there just the day before. It's so old and gritty and awesome. And Austin was so fucking amazing back then. And I wanted, my first night I went to Raoul's. I think people were teasing me like to go to this club. And I loved it, just like Carolyn said. That was me. I was completely feral. I was completely wild. I never sat down. I just speed and alcohol and boys and everything just for 4 years. That's Steve Vanderveer. Who knew they had business cards? Droobs and Big Boys. They might still live there. That's a Baby John Slate control route. Used to party. That's Davy Jones when I knew him with short hair. Ideals, Davy Jones. Just bitter, mean, you know. Mike Runnels. Somebody already talked about Mike Runnels. Steve Vanderveer. We're doing a lot of bad things before and after the show. That's me. I never wore a dress. I don't know what the heck. I look like I'm older than I am now there. Like, this is Clubfoot. That was the Austin skyline, 1981, 82. I mean, this was you just drove up. This is the inserts. I haven't heard anybody mention it. I love the inserts. Steve Vanderveer, Vic Reams, Billy Pringle, inserts. I fucking loved them. After my favorite first band was the Skunks, and then the Inserts, and then Big Boys Dicks, blah, blah, blah. So Raoul's closed and reopened several times. So that's my favorite poster there ever was. I think Steve Marsh did that. I love that. Just want that on my tombstone. It's just, this says, I'm gonna kill you, Dick's Big Boys. It's just, I have hundreds of these. I took them all down from poles on the drag. This is a letter, is Chris Gates around? This is I sent $1 in an envelope, and this is what I got. And I don't know if Chris or Tim Kerr drew it, but that's September '82 from Moment Productions. I live 2 blocks from there right now, 45 years ago. I've moved 5,000 places in between, but I'm full circle, come back home. But like Carolyn said, this scene changed my life. It made me who I am. It made me fearless and just do anything. So I've got hundreds of these posters, but I made this video this morning, so I just grabbed the ones that were on top. Unfortunately, this says keep abreast of the latest bizarre experiences for your family. I never saw any kids there, thank God, but we were kids, right? I mean, the drinking age was 18, thank goddess. I love this because it's a December '79 calendar, and there's like 5 bands, and they play like 4 times in a week, like the Next, the Terminal Mind, and I can't read it from here, but Ideals. It's just like we got to see Mark Garfinkel. Somebody mentioned the porn store. One of my boyfriends, sorry, that's the only picture I have of him. He was the horn player for Sharon Tate's Baby and I think The Delinquents. Mark Garfinkel, that's me and Karen Friedman at the Ritz. I never took a picture where I wasn't like super drunk off my ass. Like Chris said, I've been sober 30 years. If you knew me then, I apologize for what I did. A lot going on back here. This was my late crew here. I'm getting goosebumps right now. These guys look like skinheads, but it was more like about being knuckleheads than Nazis. These guys were, rest in peace, Billy Pringle, last year, ran into Billy Pringle, alive and well. That's at the Woodshop reunion. He was just fucking amazing. We had the great best talk. That Woodshop weekend was awesome. This is going to be current stuff. This is the Survive. That's me and Carolyn at the 40 Arouse reunion. That was a lot of fun. There was only like 4 ambulatory people at that, I think. And there's a lot of dead people. I'm lucky I'm alive. That's Ken Box, one of my dearest friends. I talked to him today. He moved to Louisiana. I invited him to this. And I think there's one more picture. But this scene changed. That club changed my life. I felt like the luckiest person in the world. All those people are here. Steve Marsh, Drew Dillard, Carolyn, me. That's a show that Steve did at Antone's a few years back. And we're alive. In memory of Tommy Pipes, and if this guy was here, he'd want to tell a story, and it would not make any freaking sense. You'd have to drag him off the stage.
It would be soulful. It'd be a soulful story.
It'd be a very soulful story. Thank you very much.
I'm Rob Buford. I'm gonna talk about how I got sucked into the Austin punk scene and how it affected the trajectory of my life. About 6 years ago, friends took me to a live taping of the TV show Overheard with Evan Smith. John Doe was the guest. I'd come straight from work and I was wearing a suit. At the end, people stood in line to ask questions. They were all asking about his movies and stuff like that. When it was my turn to ask my question, it went something like this. I saw the decline of Western civilization, dropped out of high school, and wrecked my life. Without missing a beat, John Doe looked back at me and said, "Well, you look like you turned out okay." For a very long time, I was ashamed of my punk rock history. I was terrified people would reject me if they found out about it. But rumors followed me wherever I went. Even worse, they were all true. It all started when I sat next to a guy named Mike DeLong in 8th grade. And Mike, like me, was interested in skateboarding and drugs. Mike introduced me to Andrew Gates, then known as Andy, and he is Chris and Nathan's little brother. This led me to Easy Roller Skate Shop, Inner Sanctum, and into all kinds of trouble. Tim Kerr, Nathan, and Biscuit all worked at Easy Rollers. Terry Laird gave me my first punk haircut at Scarlet Angel. So that's how I was introduced. For some reason that's still a mystery to me, I went all in. I dropped out of Austin High, landed in Austin's first pilot school for fuck-ups we called Switchblade High. A lot of the punk and metal kids ended up there. Drugs were a major focus. One of the first tricks I learned as a newly minted punk was how to steal student backpacks at La Fun video game arcade, then walk across the street and sell the textbooks back at the Texas Union.
It's a circular economy.
A guy named Spike taught me that one. I was in a bunch of different bands. Crotch Rot was the most successful. Thanks to the big boys, we got on the bill at lots of major shows. We got to open for Minor Threat, Circle Jerks, Misfits, Decroits, and the list goes on and on and on. And to a 16-year-old kid, that was pretty cool. And I rode that wave for several years, but it was not to last. My lifestyle started to catch up with me in the summer of 1984 when I had a stroke while riding a skateboard down 29th Street on acid. Somehow I made it to the Oaf House and just sat there for like a number of hours before I finally was able to make my way home. Then, around 1985, the friends I grew up with were all graduating from high school and starting college. I, by contrast, was a punk rock loser, street criminal with a 9th grade education. At the same time, many of my punk friends, my circle, and I'm younger than a lot of the people that's spoken here today, my circle were moving into bad stuff: burglary, car theft, hard drugs, and racism. And that, to me, was my message to get out. My friends in my circle that stayed paid a heavy price, and you saw the picture of Raj and Tommy and Jerry and Buddy Boy, and you know, they're more dead than I have time to recite here, but if they survived prison, substance abuse, it was rough. Fortunately, my parents had not given up on me, and I eventually landed in military school, which saved my life. And it was there I started to pick up the pieces. It took me literally about 3 years to snap out of it. I was that far down. So once I arrived in what I call the real world, I was basically feral. I did not know how to relate to normal people. I only knew punk culture. How do I ask a normal girl out? What do I do if she says yes? What do we talk about? I concocted this edited story that omitted all the punk rock stuff, but people were able to see through that. So on one hand, you know, you could say that I missed out a lot. I would kill to have graduated high school with the friends I grew up with, to have lived a normal life, to have normal memories, to have a high school yearbook. I don't have any high school yearbooks. My high school yearbook is a photo record of the Austin punk scene captured by only a handful of people. Pat Blashill was one of them, Bill and Lee Daniel, Dixon Colburn, rest in peace, Joff Cordner, and Russ Dude. But there is an upside. I overcorrected. And had I not crashed and burned as hard as I did, I would have never had the motivation to push myself like I did. I ended up earning 3 college degrees. I've been a board certified lawyer for 20 plus years. Thank you. And if you knew me back then, that future would seem unimaginable.
Congratulations.
Over time, I came to terms with everything and reconnected with my old punk friends. And I was in a band for years with Buff, he's here, Parrott, Pat Doyle from The Offenders, and even Tony Offender for a while until he passed away. And we even played here a few times. And I still skateboard all the time. I was at the skate park this morning. I skate with Mikey Laird, who's talking after me, Chris in the back. I love my job. Life is great. So, in conclusion, I guess I'll say I guess John Doe was right. I did turn out okay. I have a great wife, and I have more close friends than I can count. And I've become more thankful for that every day. Thank you.
Thank you to the Academy. Thank you to my parents and God. Thank you. I'm Michael Laird, and I think I was invited here because I skated and I still skate. I skated in Lockhart Skate Park this morning, which is really radical, and probably because I helped design it, it's super extreme. I didn't have anything linear here, so you'll have to bear with me. But I was commonly mistaken for being Terry Laird's younger brother. That isn't correct. But the first time that I did see Terry Laird was in Raoul's. The floor was empty. Terry Laird was sitting in a chair, headbanging to nothing, and blood pouring out from her mouth to her chin. And I thought, I'm in. I want to be a part of this. This is where I need to be. In 1977 and 78 and 79, I lived in England, and all the punk went off, and I said I'm in for that too, because prior to that, I skated and was very drawn to anything musical that was other, anything that was alienating, anything that expressed the disdain that I had. I don't know, Pink Floyd, Animals, super depressing, count me in. All that stuff was for me. So when I came back to Austin, I had ran into Chris Gates and Nathan Gates and Tim, and the first thing they wanted were my cassette tapes. Do you got any Oi? So we bonded on some of that, and they had built a half pipe, one of the first in Austin. And that's very instructive, because here back then was DIY aesthetic that Chris failed to mention. If it's not there, let's fucking do it ourselves. We're gonna do it. And that reminds me of the Texas ethos, because Texas is the absence of water. And when it rains in Texas, as you know, these flash floods can be catastrophic. So the creation of long curved drainage ditches informed us of a way to surf when none of us, we're not surfers, we're feral animals, and we have a lot of aggression, and we don't belong. Except we found tribes, and these tribes in Texas existed in Austin, San Antonio, El Paso, Dallas, Houston. Anywhere where there were weirdo others, those people got skateboards, maybe they started a band, maybe they'll build half pipes themselves, and they're gonna go on with their other mentality, as I have and every one of you have, that we're gonna figuratively skate through life, and I'm gonna be in the nursing home listening to my Black Flag in my mind, singing these songs that were my nursery songs. And you people wrote them. And I'm going to be there in my dementia, but I will remember all of these 45s that I had, and it's thanks to you. I want to thank all of you, not just for my award, but for allowing me to come to these shows all the time. And I didn't know your name, but I remember you. I remembered you then, and I had an overwhelming feeling of safety, that here the harm from the outside world, the harm from my childhood, was not going to infect me. Here is safety. So I kept going, and I'm still in, thank you. Here's my shout out to you. I want to also shout out to the Big Boys show, after which in every single one, they would say, now go start your own band. What is a greater, there's nothing greater that could have been said for that. So I want to thank them too. How are we doing on our thing here?
You have half a minute.
Half a minute?
Yep.
I'll give my time back to the next excellent person, but
Reclaiming my time.
yeah, I'm going to share my time. And thanks for everything.
Last April, the former members of Meat Joy got back together for the first time in 38 years. We rented Rob Alverson's studio up on Cameron Road, which is the home of the first heritage tree here in Austin, Texas. Cameron Road takes that crazy turn right there because that was the first tree we saved. And makes Cameron Road curve. We had a great time. We're going to re-release our record, and we're going to do some gigs here in October. We're playing Cheer Up Charlie's, we're going to play the Museum of Human Achievement, and KUTX is going to let us come play.
Me joy.
One of the things we were doing in the band was listening to all the old cassette tapes we recorded with blasters at shows because we wanted to put out a live cassette tape as a gift to you guys when we come back in October. And there were all these crazy interstitials that you hear between songs. And so right now I just want to do a little tribute to Teresa Taylor, who we just recently lost. Teresa was Meat Joy's first drummer. Teresa and Gretchen were partners, and the partnership was coming to an end. And 2 weeks before Teresa left the band, we have Gibby on tape standing off in a show, and you hear him say very clearly, "Damn, she's a good drummer." 2 weeks later, she's their second drummer. One of my most joyous moments in life was watching King and Teresa from the side at the Ritz, just to watch them play so hard and collapse behind the drums and heave and breathe and sweat and leap up again and play again. It was so amazing. Another interstitial we had, the very first show Meat Joy played was, we played actually as Dichotomy at Studio 29, crashed a fundraiser of some kind. And right after the show you hear a local poet, Eleanor Crockett, say, "They may not know what they're doing, but they know what they're not doing."
Ain't doing it.
I wanted to talk about, and it's been mentioned earlier, the Vault, a couple of clubs that were alternative clubs in town, the fringe clubs. The Vault terrified me because there was only one door. I saw some great shows there, but I was always hovering near the door. Just scared me. And the other was Voltaire's Basement.
Also one door.
One door, unless you knew about the chute, the delivery chute in the back. And that's the only reason I could get into that club and go, because I figured I had a secret escape the whole time. So I want to talk about Steve Fitch, who created that space for us. Before we started doing rock shows, though, our theater group, Big State Productions, had done a production of Terrence McNally's Things Go Bump in the Night in that basement. And that was Steve's wheels started churning. And he's like, "Oh, we can do shows down here. We can do shows." Meat Joy opened and closed those shows. Closed Voltaire's bookstore. Paperbacks Plus was upstairs. Remember, Michelle Schacht lived in the science fiction section when she was homeless? Yep. And all those great Austin poets that were there, also Pat Ellis and Taylor, and Fitch himself, who was an outstanding poet. I was in numerous bands with Fitch. We played only co-op parties. And we would get together, the Nerve Brothers, the Happy Guys, the 5 Happy Guys as in disc guys, and the Nerve Brothers, and we would only play co-op shows. Because when you worked with Fitch, you didn't rehearse, you drilled. You drilled your songs. So there were always amazing shows, always loved his voice. I'm going to get back to Fitch in just a second, because there's a thing that people have been dancing around here. Maybe it was because of our economic situation where we live so cheaply here in Austin. The Flophouse, we paid $65 a month each for rent. Flophouse was if we housed Sonic Youth for their first visit. the Buffalo Gals Warehouse, another one of those crazy clubs. Husker Du played their first show there. The Buffalo Gals, Beat Joy, many bands rehearsed there also. There was a thing that I believe, and David Yao has been talking to Johnny Hawks out in California, and he feels the same thing, that we had our own regional art scene happening. And it wasn't just the punk rock, because there were all those kids in film school, and we were making movies, and we were doing the thing, and then we're making the posters. And the thing is, we had these den mothers, Gary Floyd and Randy Biscuit Turner, who it was just mentioned, every night, go out there and start a band. And people did it. I had no musical abilities, no actual skills, and I played in numerous bands and got away with it. I played as an actor, you're absolutely right. It wasn't happening in other places. New York, San Francisco, I had lived in San Francisco, visited in New York. People were they were so unhappy there because they had to work so fucking hard. But we didn't have to work so hard because we had this, we didn't pay so much for rent. And it made so many creative things possible, and we were rubbing up against the poets and the musicians from all genres. Shea Fred, David Yao, John Perkins, now Hawks, myself, Albert Jennings, who was one of these young kids on the punk scene, who brought in Kelly D, who played at my wife's birthday party the other day. She DJ'd the other day. You know, all these amazing things coming out of Shea Fred up on the drag, you know? So, Fitch, I miss you. I used to see you at some shows here in town. I don't know where he is, but if anybody sees him, tell him I'm reaching out to him. Do you guys, a couple of things about us I remember. Do you remember shuttle buses? I rode shuttle buses for free everywhere. In fact, met Todd Cassins from the Shoulders Now, the Jefferson Trout, numerous bands and stuff. Cool drivers playing great music on their own blasters in the shuttle buses. That was so cool. Who remembers moving to the campus area for summer because the rents were cheaper, because there were no students around? You just moved for 3 months, get a 3-month place, moving all the time. And who remembers Lizzie Pot Call Home? It was graffiti that spread all over town. It was Lizzie Pot Call Home. And that's the cry I'm putting out right now. Steve Fitch, Call Home.
Hey, I'm Toby. I'm going to talk about the Blue Flamingo because I played there more than any other person, I believe. But we'll get that. Pat asked me to talk to kind of bridge the gap to the 90s scene from the 80s scene here, and I was around a little bit in the 80s, but I was not playing in a band. So to put y'all in the right mood, I brought my edgiest t-shirt from the 90s. This became like low rotation pajamas somewhere around September 2001, I believe. But anyway, so my first show was at the Cavity. The Cavity was this club. It was open by '91, and it wasn't even a club. It was just the Cavity, and it was a BYOB space. And it was about to close after about a month because it had no business plan. And then Dave Herman approached my brother John Paul, and John Paul lent Dave Herman $500 to keep the Cavity open. And I told him honestly, like, I said, don't do it. That place is going to be open for like 2 weeks, right? Because they said you can have a lifetime membership. You can always get in free, like for $500. It wasn't even a loan. It was like, you're the only lifetime member of the Cavity. And I looked just like my brother, so I got in free. And the thing is that I probably wouldn't have ever had a band because I thought I wasn't good enough. But going with a backpack full of Lone Star, like 4 or 5 nights a week, I saw so many people play that I could play better than, that I was like, oh my God, I have to start a band, you know? So anyway, Cavity closed. I played 1 show there. We were so edgy. It was so 90s. My band was called Disease is Punishment. That is fucking edgy, right? We got that from a Devo video. Anyway, so we played with this 23-piece Subgenius orchestra, and we had a problem with this band. We sucked so bad that our problem was getting to the set without taking acid, which was like all around the place, and someone dosed me, and I remember sitting up there playing my first show, and I'd been practicing this set, and I was just thinking like, while I was playing, I was like, damn, I would never come see this band. Like, I was just like, trying to learn the songs. I never even thought past that. While we were playing, I was like, dude, I would never see this. This is awful, you know? So anyway, that club shut down after one show. We even tapped a keg at the front of the stage, and people would come up and get their beer and then walk back out. We sucked. All right, so fast forward, it's the summer of fucking '93, and Emo's is open, Cavity's closed, and me and Suzanne Bishop used to go to the Blue Flamingo and watch the drag show when we couldn't handle Emo's anymore. And Miss Laura actually gave me I love her, she gave me my big break in showbiz. And she used to do a drag show, and at the end she would come up and sing Respect. And Suzanne was like, hey, you ought to get her to let your band play here. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't know. And so I asked her, and I was like, hey, Miss Laura, I've got a punk rock band. I'd like to maybe do a show. And she's like, well, I've got nothing going on Wednesdays this month. And she said, you said punk rock, right? And I was like, yeah. And she said, I don't know. I let a punk rock band play here. They were called the Dog Shit Rangers. And they brought a dead dog into my club. And you have to promise me that if I give you a show, you have to give me your word that you will not bring any dead animals into my club. And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can guarantee that won't happen. And I kept up my end of the deal. So anyway, we sucked, and we played, this is my band before the Motards. We played every Monday or Wednesday, the August of '93. And the only two people who came, it was an accomplishment when someone came back to see us a second time, and it only happened once. And it was Dave Head from the Motards came with his date, Amy, who I wound up getting married to and having a kid with. And but yeah, they were our only fans. I guess if you call fans someone who's seen a band twice, you know. So anyway, pretty soon after that, that band folded because the other guys, well, I'd go to their house and they were always listening to like Primus and God, what was the other shitty White Zombie? Anyway, I was like, this sucks, I'm leaving. And so we started the Motards, and that was where I could get a show. And so we started playing there, and I think the Motards played there more than any other band. But the 4 shows I did before that, I think, make me the person who played there more than any other person. But anyway, so I want to really shout out there to Miss Laura. I love her to death, and I'd like to see her around more often. And thanks y'all a lot. Thanks for bearing with me.
I hope I'm not the last. If I am the last, don't think of me as a headliner. Think of me as the pitcher batting at the end of the lineup. This has been a really good night. You know, you don't have to live in Austin for long before someone comes up to you and tells you it was better before you got here. Amen. And I kind of wonder about, you know, like when I got here in the summer '87, was it better before I got here? I mean, you know, the big boys and the dicks and the offenders had all broken up. MDC had long since moved to San Francisco. The Butthole Surfers were based in Georgia at the time, and Scratch Acid just played their last show. But we did have the '87 edition of Woodstock to look forward to. But by the time we got to Woodstock, the whole thing had been canceled at the last minute. And there was a sign on the road, you know, the back road leading there that said it was canceled. And I was like, I don't believe that. We're going. So we get there. And there was just no one there except a couple of stragglers standing forlornly around a VW van. And one of them walked up to me and said, "You, yes, lucky you, have just been screwed." So, you know, maybe the 80s were kind of what you might call a rebuilding era in sports. But a lot of what was going on in the late 80s, anyway, I mean, I'm talking about the late 80s specifically, you know, it was laying the groundwork, I think, for what was going to happen in the 90s. And, you know, in the meantime, the Ritz was happening pretty solidly in 87. I remember one day, you know, I got a call from a friend, 7 Seconds came to town. And no notice, nothing in the paper. They're playing a gig for $1. You want to go? And so he saw 7 Seconds for $1. You know, Fishbone came and did a 2-night stand, and it's just like, it was totally like a sweat bath. Everybody was totally skanked out. But the show that was really the rite of passage for me was on July 4th, 1987, and that was Poison 13, The Party Owls, Jaws of Life, and with the Hickoids headlining. And man, the Hickoids, I've never seen anything like that in my life at that point as an 18-year-old kid. They slashed and sloshed through all this hard-corn punk rock music and breakneck speeds. You know, they're all just all over the place, and you think they're going to fall apart, and somehow they don't. And I remember the night culminated with Jeff Smith singing "Be My Lover" by Alice Cooper, and somebody crashed the stage and got completely naked and started kind of deep-throating the mouth and deep-throating the mic and grunting and, you know, "Oh, won't you be my lover?" And it was just this grotesque counter melody to the whole thing. And you know, I was too shy to get involved. I was just kind of standing back, a chin scratcher. I couldn't get too close. But you know, my insides were buzzing. I'd always loved music, but this was like I wanted to be a part of this. And so you know, I kept going to shows, and kept going to shows at the Ritz. And that, you know, there's a few of the many ghostly emissions that have happened at the Ritz over the years. You know, and I don't know how hard Joe Rogan's going to scrub that place out, but they're never coming. They're never coming out. They're always going to be in the walls there. Another place where things were happening back then was a little Vietnamese restaurant on North Loop next to the Austin State Hospital, Paupers Cemetery, Dong Huang, yeah. Very unlikely home base for like a lot of the new emergent stuff coming out. You know, a couple of the people you might have heard of, you know, Ed Hall, ST-37, Pocket Fisherman were some of the big ones who came out of there. There were also, you know, bands like Thanatopsis Throne and Queen Penis and all sorts of other groups. But Ed Hall, ST-37, and the Fishermen, I think, really kind of laid a lot of the groundwork for what would go on to happen in the 90s. And the first time I ever got to see the Fishermen, I think it was in 1989. It was at, there was a student organization at UT called the Young Anarchist Front. And they put on a festival on UT's, on the East Mall, not the West Mall, the East Mall. And the Pocket Fishermen get up there, they have all these bed sheets everywhere saying, "Worship us." And you know, before they start playing, you know, Amy Carter and Leader is Burning and everything, they come up on the mic and they say, you know, anarchy is really cool and everything, but you know, we've got some government jobs we don't want to lose. And I had no idea that in just a few years I'd be sharing both a stage and a career path with those guys. And you know, who could forget Squat Thrust? You remember Squat Thrust, everyone out there? Yeah. I saw them for the first time, I think, like in 88, and they played in this homemade plastic bubble made of like plastic sheeting and a fan. And their bass player, Wade Longenberger, rest in peace, was on stilts, these wooden stilts that made him about 7 feet tall, and he's decked out in this Gene Simmons regalia. And to me, it's like any band that puts that much effort into like a gig on a Thursday night is worthy of my attention. And you know, I think like a lot of the bands we've talked about tonight, I mean, you know, certainly the big boys right at the front of the pack, you know, they taught us to dress up, and they taught us to put on a show. And they taught us to participate, and they taught us to have fun. So I was really stoked when I was doing this State of the Scene piece for the Chronicle back in 1993, and Biscuit agreed to talk to me. And it was an interesting piece. A lot of the people at the time were talking about what Austin lacked in comparison to places like DC and Seattle. Like people were saying, oh, you know, if only we had a radio station, like a college station like KCMU, or if we had an alt-weekly that really got into covering music to the degree that something like the Rocket does, or if we had a local label like Sub Pop. So I thought maybe Biscuit would kind of go that same way, and you know, but you know, he had nothing but good things to say about what was going on in 1993, and he even had nice things to say about the Chronicle and South by Southwest. And those of you who are part of that scene at the time know that that wasn't something like, you know, the punks really said very often. And the take-home quote for me that I'm going to just read to you directly that he said was, if you're complaining and trying to make things happen at the same time, at least you're stirring things up. But if you're just being a bump on a log and complaining, you're not adding to it. And you know, I didn't know Biscuit like a lot of you guys here did, but you know, the fact that he took time out to say that, and you know, that it laid a pretty big egg in my brain. You know, it taught me that, you know, as a writer, that, you know, a cheap slag is just empty calories. Second, it really taught me about the value of celebrating what's good right now is better than waxing for what was or what might have been. And most importantly, I think, you know, just, you know, to get a highly participatory scene like we have here, you got to lower that barrier between the performers and the participants, and give those unique voices a chance to be heard. And that's something that I think, you know, and what we've heard about here tonight, that's something that's happened in Austin for a really long time. It was definitely a recurring theme in the book that I've been working on with my co-author Richard Weimark. We're doing a book called A Curious Mix of People, which is an oral history about Austin music in the 90s. And then, you know, Pat's going to do a book about music in the 80s, so we're going to have a nice little historical compendium for the ages. But you know, what we had in Austin, I mean, what we had in Austin in the 90s was special. It was definitely special to us. It was never perfect, but you know, many of the people we talked to in this book talked about being part of other scenes where you didn't have that ability to just jump in and participate, to just show up and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and then you suddenly have all these new friends, and then next thing you know, you're not standing in the audience, you're on stage in a band. And that goes double for anyone who wasn't a straight white male, I think. So you can't get to what we had in the 90s without having what a lot of people in this room built during the 80s. So, you know, to Biscuit, to all you folks here, and all the folks who, you know, aren't with us anymore, I just really want to give a heartfelt thank you for building that foundation.